Auschwitz. It was a cold, wet, windy night. Clouds floated quickly past the full moonlight. Ancient buildings stood black and deserted, silhouetted against the sky. A flame was ignited in Auschwitz, the crematoria, partly destroyed by the fleeing Nazis in the wake of the Soviet onslaught, was mysteriously restored to its pristine beauty. The guards awoke as though from a slumber they had been assigned to forever. SS Sturmbannführer Kaltenbrunner said, "Look alive, men, we have some killing to do. The first shipment of victims will be arriving soon." The railway line, which was undermined, was made ready again for the steam train to roll along to the prison gate, and would unfold and unfold upon Europe's floor to every church and school with open doors. And everyone would come compelled by an unknown force to that train's doors. The people would climb aboard and willingly surrender their freedom for a cup of cold water and a slice of bread. They would ride that train, and that train would stop at every town, city and village to pick everyone up who was willing to go to their deaths because they were no longer brave enough to want to live. For they gave away their souls, and their souls rode on that train, and every famous name that you ever knew was sat in their seats and were wined and dined. They all ate their food because each of them knew the words they said were going to die. The train grew longer and longer, and like a conveyor belt reached out across the world. Businessmen contributed to the smooth running of the train, for once again it became an industrial machine, a production line for the destruction of the mind. The train grew so long that even as people were getting on at the other end, others were getting off in the concentration camp, and every famous person you once knew walked down the ramp and joined the queue. SS Sturmbannführer Kaltenbrunner said, "Walk right in, there is no need to stop and think, for once you are here, there's nowhere else you could possibly be, and nowhere else you could possibly go." Clickety-clack went the wheels of the train, clickety-clack. A flame was lit in Auschwitz concentration camp as a spontaneous reaction to the call of the people for the destruction of their imagination, and the half-destroyed crematoria restored itself as if by magic, and guards appeared who always believed one day the world would appreciate what they'd done and ask them to do it all over again. The people, the books, the words and the letters they wrote walked down those steps to meet their fate. All the great sayings that had ever been said preceded the parade at the head of the queue, for all those sayings were going to be burned too. And their smoke filled the sky, the words were ashes and dust. Each speck of ash that fell was the letter of a word that would begin to tell you what you needed to know if you wanted to live, if you felt that you had something to give. But those flames in the oven are burning to take it all away from you. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And there was something deep in the heart of that crematoria that knew the answer to the question, but never told anyone, because no one ever asked why we are burning all of our knowledge that we collected. So I asked why, and the crematoria said, because it has all been rejected, and as a result, all your knowledge is being burned to ashes. And yes, I was there too, for when I was a child I saw myself stood before two gates, with a boy and a girl on either side, who said to me, "Won't you take a look inside?" The sun was shining high in the sky, and it was the gates of knowledge, and the only question you would ever need to ask was why. I entered in because I wanted to know everything. I saw the picture of two men hanging on the chapel wall, and all I wanted to know was what they were talking about, and what their words were trying to say, and what the pictures they drew meant, the letters they fashioned, what all of them said, individually and collectively. I wanted to know it all. I even thought I might have something to say myself, and I tried to write it, like someone would who meant every word they said, so the word might live. And I really thought I had something to give, and I wrote and I wrote, and I left school to do it, because it really surprised me when I asked my teachers for the answers to my questions. They really didn't know what I was talking about. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. A flame was lit in Auschwitz, for the teachers decided they had nothing to teach us, but they had to do something with us, and so they said the only way to enlightenment as a scientifically approved, smooth and efficient mechanical race is not to educate them so they understand it all, but to keep them in ignorance so the machine can maintain itself. But the machine cannot live because its food is knowledge, and the machine needs knowledge to survive, and the machine demands knowledge or it will die. But the people no longer have knowledge on their minds, but it still resides in their souls, and the machine can have those too, because the people don't want them anymore. Yet no one knows how to feed the machine, so the machine takes on a life of its own, so it can feed itself. And in the moment the machine begins to live, as the positive feeds off the negative, there is the creation of life, just like Mary Shelley's monster, Frankenstein. And yes, they both walk into that crematoria, hand in hand, for it was in that moment of their creation the light came on in Auschwitz concentration camp. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The crematoria, partly destroyed by the fleeing Nazis in the face of the Soviet onslaught, was restored by the machine when no one was looking, for no one believed that any of these things could ever happen again. But it can in your dreams, and the machine can make all of your dreams come true. And that was when the flame was lit, because all the people wanted the machine to do all their thinking for them. But to do so they had to give the machine their hearts and their souls, or nothing would have happened at all. Then at last your worst nightmare came true. You found yourself leaving your hearth and your home with a cardboard suitcase carrying your valuables with you. You run down to the station where the man at the gate gives you your ticket to your distant destination with one word written on it, and the word was fate, and he says the passwords to you. I want to be ignorant too. The rain rolls on like an eternal tram, endless carriages with room for everyone, a nice comfortable seat and anything you would like to eat. For ignorance always looked for the comfortable life, and said to the soul, eat well, for tomorrow you'll die. And I got on that train, and I never once asked why. For I walked in the cornfield where the corn always grew, that was the food of knowledge, and I never noticed the blood-red orange clouds until long after all my friends died. And even though I saw the flames in the city and the words chaos written across the sky, I did not understand what it meant until I heard the humming of the machine, which I thought was a spaceship coming for me to transform me and transport me to other worlds and fields of knowledge. All the time I heard the call, I followed the sound because I believed in the Lord. I followed my heart and soul as I was compelled to do, but I was always alone. I could not find anyone, and I wondered where it was that they had all gone. And I watched Schindler's List, and I read Schindler's Ark, and I mourned the moment when the world was dark, and I knew for sure that it would never happen again until I watched that film one more time. And I read an article that said the text on a cereal packet was just as important as any word that Shakespeare wrote. The only difference was the level of importance that we the people put on the value of each of them. But if you believe in democracy, then you have to put equal value upon everything, and in fact it is better if we forget about them altogether. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And the flame was lit in Auschwitz, and I found myself riding on a train, running up and down the carriages like a demented monkey, trying to explain to the people sat in their comfortable seats that the destination to which they were going was not enlightenment, but desolation and ruin, and the people just smiled at me and said, "We know what we are doing, it's you that doesn't." I did not know what they meant. I was encouraged to try harder by this lack of encouragement. I quoted the words I had read, and even the words I had written myself, and their eyes glazed over, and they laconically said, "We will not be diverted from our path, no matter how much you tell us the truth, for if the machine runs our lives, then at last we can forget about everything else and simply enjoy ourselves." Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. I sat down in my seat. The person sat next to me said, "Eat your food. It will make you feel good and help you forget your desire to seek the truth." I realized then I had to get off that train, and when it stopped, that's exactly what I did. I walked in that field quite alone among that corn where I had been before. I saw clouds of blood red with lightning flashes striking the ground that made a sound that struck fear in my heart, for I knew then the crematoria would never stop until it had consumed all the knowledge in the world. The machine was coming for me. It was coming for my knowledge. It was laying a railroad line right up to my door and inviting me to take the ride, to finish the journey this time. Come to my heart. Come and see the flames by which my fires are stoked, the flames of wisdom and knowledge in the process of destroying themselves. So will you ride that train to the heart of the fire? You know that you must come in your desire to know it all. You must experience the ultimate experience of letting your knowledge go and to be consumed by the flame, and you will survive to tell the tale, or you will die. That's the choice that you must make. I found myself on that train, and the flame shone bright in Auschwitz that night, because even though I'd understood it all, I could not refuse that flame, and when it called. And now the carriage has arrived at the heart of the machine that consumes all the knowledge in the world, and now it will consume yours, and the doors of the ovens will close behind you, and you will become a blind man like everyone else. And there was a thunderous roar. I found myself saying that all I was doing was trying to add a little more knowledge to the world, but the noise was so loud, and I looked around and I saw all the people riding that train, saying the same words as me, and the sound they made was that deafening roar, and the flames that consumed them grew intense at the heat, for it was the knowledge of man upon which the flame did feed, and it burned until everything we had learned was consumed, and the flame began to die a little more each day, until the teacher said there is nothing more to say, and gave out worthless pieces of paper upon which were written certain symbols that no one understood, and it was in that moment the flame went out for good. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, and the flame went out in Auschwitz, and the crematoria was broken once more, where once it was mysteriously restored. The guards fell asleep, and SS Sturbenführer Kaltenbrunner knew deep in his heart that this was the end. He could send a letter to his leader saying, "Mission accomplished. I hope you are satisfied, mein Führer, for you were the only one that truly knew that it was knowledge alone that stoked these boilers, and not the Jews." And what of the people? Suddenly they began to stumble, for they could no longer hear that machine rumble. The train came to a stop, the line disappeared, the rolling stock crumpled, and the people tumbled into one another, and they could not understand anything they said to each other, for they all spoke a different language than their sisters and brothers, for they had been told to learn to speak for themselves and write down whatever they felt, and it didn't matter if it was misspelled, because no one would read it anyway, and all that mattered was that you expressed yourself. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, and the flame went out in Auschwitz, for there was nothing left to feed the fire. All around was confusion. There were all those people and no food to feed them, so they began to eat each other, and their mouths were filled with blood and the flesh of their children, and all of them stared off into the distance, and they saw nothing, for they were consumed by their own ignorance. And now I know everything, and you want to know how it all ends? This is how it all ends. I am staring off into the distance, with the fingers of my children in my hand, and their blood running from out of my mouth. Clickety-clack. The end.